Hi, I'm John Green. Welcome to my salon. This is Mental Floss Video, and did you know that according to some people, those from Delaware used to be called muskrats? Historically, the state had a lot of muskrats, and in the past few decades, the debate about hunting and eating muskrats in Delaware has been intense, but in 2014, it was reported that there were only a few restaurants in Delaware still serving the delicacy. Anyway, that's the first of many states with weird nicknames for their residents I'm gonna share with you today. According to multiple sources, people of Arizona have been referred to as sand cutters over the years, but we don't really know why, although the deserts in Arizona could be a hint. Another mysterious nickname, Hoosier, meaning a person from here in Indiana. It's been a popular term since the 1830s. One theory is that it used to refer specifically to boatmen from Indiana. Another is that it used to mean more uncivilized people. Perhaps residents of Indiana took a rude nickname and made it positive. But the one I heard growing up is that whenever you knocked on the door of a person from Indiana, they would say, Hoosier! But a word that definitely came from a negative nickname, Arkies, aka residents of Arkansas. That term came to be around the 1930s, and it used to be a disparaging way to refer to vagrant workers from around the US, but most likely from Arkansas. You can also call people from the state Arkansoyers. If you're from California, you're a Californian, which is a pretty boring nickname, but people of Spanish ancestry who were born in the region around the 18th to mid-19th century had a more fun named Californios. Like the Hoosiers, some of the names on this list are recognizable thanks to sports teams. So, for instance, people from North Carolina are called Tar Heels, just like the UNC athletic teams. And this is also a mysterious one. People believe it came from one of two places. The first is that during the Revolutionary War, a British troop got slowed down by tar, either from local trees or because of a trap. The second is that Civil War troops in North Carolina wanted to apply tar to the heels of their fellow soldiers who were trying to retreat. But North Carolinians were called tar boilers in the 1840s, so it may just be a reference to the state's role as the tar capital of America. A Buckeye is someone from Ohio, named after a tree local to the region. The first known time a person was called a Buckeye was in 1788, before Ohio was even founded. There's a legend that it was originally a nickname for a very tall Continental Army officer before it spread, but we do know it was popularized by William Henry Harrison's presidential campaign, which used the Buckeye as a symbol. That campaign, of course, was successful, and Ohio resident William Henry Harrison went on to be President of the United States for an entire month before he died. Jayhawker, a resident from Kansas, also has vague origins, but it probably had to do with Kansas's role in the Civil War era. The original Jayhawkers were people from Kansas who participated in guerrilla fighting against pro-slavery residents in Kansas and surrounding states, especially Missouri. They would steal from farms, and some were abolitionists who freed slaves. In the late 19th century, there were land claims races in modern-day Oklahoma, and sometimes people would cheat a little to acquire land to settle on. Especially eager participants who had early access were given the name Sooners. Today, that word means anyone from Oklahoma. Nutmeggers, meanwhile, are people from Connecticut. This could just be because colonial merchants often cooked with nutmeg, which was imported from the East Indies. Others posit that merchants actually sold fake nutmegs made of wood in colonial America, making it a less innocent nickname. A Floridian used to be known as a fly up the creek. They got this name because it refers to the small green heron, of which there are many in Florida. A goober grabber is, of course, a person who picks peanuts, and because the crops are commonly grown in Georgia, the term also came to mean a Georgian, although it could also mean a resident of North Carolina or Arkansas as well, where peanuts are also common. Speaking of food-related nicknames, Alaskans are also known as sourdough. It was really important to Westerners who traveled to Alaska and used sourdough so they could have leavened bread. Apparently, they would even sleep with their sourdough starter, a mixture of flour, water, and yeast, etc., in the winter to keep it warm. Wisconsin residents are known as cheeseheads. This started out and remains an offensive term for Dutch people. And the people of Idaho were once called fortune seekers because a large number of them had moved there for gold and silver mining. These days, of course, there are two main reasons to move to Idaho. The first is to play football for Boise State, and the second is, when you're in the Federal Witness Protection Program. Citizens of Illinois have been called suckers since the 19th century. This also may have something to do with mining. People would migrate up to the area to mine when the weather was good, then they would leave when it became autumn. There was also a fish breed known as suckers who also migrated, so people got the same name. Of course, the nickname could also refer to their voting habits, given that, about 50% of their governors end up in jail. Sorry, here in Indiana we've got a little bit of a rivalry with the other I states. Okay, this isn't so much a weird one, but Hawaiian words are sometimes used to distinguish between someone who was born in the state, Kama'aina, and a newcomer, Malahini. Iowa is called the Hawkeye state, so it makes sense that the people in it are Hawkeyes, and that was true even before Iowa was a state. The Last of the Mohicans was published in 1826, featuring a character named Hawkeye, and then in 1843 a newspaper editor in the area named his paper Hawkeye in honor of the Native American leader Black Hawk, which boosted the nickname's popularity. Iowa, by the way, is a lot like Indiana, except it's somehow even flatter, and also there are no professional sports teams. Someone from Maine, particularly in the southeast, is called a downeaster. The most common explanation is that in the Maine shipping season, ships traveled downwind as they went eastwards to Maine from other parts of New England, but there's still questions about the etymology. Similarly, there's a region in Michigan whose residents are known as Yoopers. These are people who live in the upper peninsula of the state, as in UP, hence Yooper. The primarily Catholic people who founded Maryland were called craw thumpers. That name referred to Catholics who would beat their chest, aka craw, during confession. The word is still occasionally used as a name for Marylander, but it's pretty rare in modern usage. I think we should bring it back though. The University of Maryland has a terrible mascot, the Terrapins, and they could easily become the craw thumpers. A Bay Stater is someone from Massachusetts, and Mass is the Bay State because of its many bays: Cape Cod Bay, Narragansett Bay, Massachusetts Bay, etc. Tennessee is the butternut state, so you can call its residents butternuts. The term refers to a tan-colored uniform that Civil War soldiers from Tennessee wore. Knickerbocker became a word for New Yorker in the early 19th century after Washington Irving wrote his History of New York under the pseudonym Diedrich Knickerbocker. Eventually, the nickname, which Irving took from a friend and translates as toy marble baker, became associated with the old Dutch residents of New York and then New Yorkers in general, and that's why we have the New York Knicks. Someone from Missouri is a piker. There's a Pike County in the state, which many people left during the 1850s to go west, so it was one of the only things that outsiders knew about Missouri. They therefore dubbed its residents Pikers. For a while, Pennsylvanians were called Pennamites. That probably won't surprise you if you're familiar with the Pennamite-Yankee Wars from 1769 to 1799 between the Yankees of Connecticut and the Pennamites of Pennsylvania. And speaking of Yankees, from the 1930s through the 1960s, a swamp Yankee basically meant someone from the Northeast who was rural and maybe less cultured. Eventually, it became more general and could mean anyone from Rhode Island. There are still Swamp Yankee Day festivals in Rhode Island. A sandlapper is a resident of South Carolina, though some say it's only from the Sand Hills region because, sand. As for the lapper part, the meaning has been lost over time, but many believe it had something to do with the Revolutionary War, maybe because soldiers would have to crawl around in sand during combat. A more modern hypothesis, though, says that it has to do with residents eating clay. And finally, I return to my salon to tell you that if you are from Wyoming, you are known as a Wyomingite, which might not sound exciting, but it is also the name of a type of rock that you can find in Sweetwater County, Wyoming. And that's the kind of fact that's just barely interesting enough to be included on our list, Wyomingites. As for the other states of the Union, I'm sorry, but you are properly boring. I don't want to go through Alabama and Louisiana and Minnesota. And congratulations to all of you from properly interesting states. Thanks for watching Mental Floss video, which is made with the help of all of these lovely people. If we missed a nickname from people in your state or country, please let us know in comments, and as we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.